Welcome back to Episode 4 of the video lecture series for the upcoming book, Money Chasing Behavior. This is the author, Zach Ox, and in this lecture we will cover the core concepts for Chapter 4, focusing on how supply and demand models are broken and how money chasing behavior causes this breakdown. As a quick recap, in the last lecture we covered constructs like borders, institutions, and money or currency. And when it comes to money, how this particular social tool maps onto reality. We covered two distinct types of relationships between a currency's properties and the underlying reality. In short, how our current forms of money fail to have a direct relationship to reality, and how exactly we should want to design a currency and money supply to map onto the real costs of wealth creation. If you didn't see the last lecture or struggled with these very difficult concepts, it would be best to return to Episode 3 after we discuss today's topics. And without any further delay, let's get into Chapter 4 and how money chasing behavior causes the breakdown of our supply and demand models. We'll start with supply and demand and then bring in money chasing behavior at the tail end. Don't worry, we're going to stick with the most basic elements so even those with no prior knowledge can follow. Here we have the basic axes with price on the upright or y-axis, low on the bottom and price increasing upward, and the same goes for the quantity of goods on the bottom or x-axis going left to right. This red line is the supply curve, and at any point along it, will tell us the price at which a given amount of goods will be produced. Blue is demand, or what those in the market are willing to pay, and where they meet is the equilibrium. And here we see how many goods will be produced and at what price they will sell. Apart from externalities or unintended effects, whether good or bad, this equilibrium is considered optimal for the market, both for the consumers and producers. Excellent, so let's see how this model actually does the exact opposite of what it's supposed to do by analyzing the market for clean drinking water. Let's set the price at a penny per liter, although it will be cheaper or more expensive depending on the market you have access to. And the corresponding quantity will be 800 billion liters per the UN's 50 to 100 liter per person requirement. And so we have a temporal reference, this is per day. The green area represents the monetary expenditures on water and how much water is produced. This means that if you can afford water, you sit within this purchasing group. And this includes those who are both willing and able to pay at or above the market price. Not that this is all relevant to our conversation, but the blue area is known as consumer benefit. The real issue is what happens to those right of the equilibrium. This portion of the population are those who cannot afford the market price, and we call this being priced out of the market. So if this portion of the population cannot afford clean drinking water, what happens to them? Well, if we don't have clean drinking water, we risk death, or under conditions of no water, certain death. If you don't already know how bad a problem obtaining clean drinking water is, take the time to pause on these two slides, because this is a real horror show that everyone should be aware of. As we can see, this is a travesty for many, but by the end we should be able to see why this is a problem for everyone, not just those directly suffering. When someone falls into the priced out area, they will die if they don't have water. This results in water bearing or traveling and carrying water back home, and this is primarily done by women and children. Let's start by comparing two average women from each population. By definition, these two are equal in general capacities. We can control for educational differences by selecting a low to no skill occupation for the woman on the left of the equilibrium, something like road paving, which we can classify as a shovel-ready job with no prior skills required. By being equal in capacities, we can say that the water bearer could also do the road paving job as well. Now, The benefits of road paving are very high, as this labor provides surplus utility to society at large, with roads being a common pool utility. Water bearing, on the other hand, is very different. While water bearing is incredibly important as this labor prevents the death of the individuals who consume this water, this labor is purely life-sustaining, or the maintenance of well-being for the few who benefit, and we denote this by the bar over the benefit. This is by all accounts a waste of labor, or an inefficiency if the water bearer's labor could be providing a surplus benefit by paving roads. Road paving, again, is a net benefit that increases the size of the pie. The problem is that individuals priced out of the market cannot afford not to collect and transport water, and this is because our systems do not accurately reflect labor potential. This inaccuracy is caused by a flawed implicit assumption of the optimal equilibrium as it relates to price and money. We assume that the social units of money reflect some real utility within the market. So then social unit expenditures indicate to the market where labor and goods are best spent. But, as we covered extensively in the previous lecture, the social units we call money do not map onto real labor. Even if you did not see the last lecture, this is evident in this example by the equal labor capacity between these two individuals not yielding the same number of social units. And when this occurs, the water bearer continues to have an insufficient number of units to signal to the rest of the market that her labor capacity warrants receiving goods and services. This flawed relationship creates what we can call a labor-locked loop. This is a flawed signaling feedback loop that works like this. By having no units to start, the water bearer cannot afford the market price of purchasable water. So, she cannot receive water from a market exchange. Because she cannot receive water from the market, and the fact that her and her dependents will die without water, this forces her to expend her labor on water bearing. Because water bearing does not earn her money, the social signaling to the market of her value is zero. This then restarts the cycle the next day as her number of social units have not changed and the failed signaling is repeated. This failed social signaling can repeat for an individual's entire life. All the while, the market cannot see the real labor capacity for increasing societal well-being. That is, until a disruption occurs. When a well-building charity comes into a water-impoverished area and builds well infrastructure, labor productivity instantly increases as water bearing is eliminated and labor goes to other tasks. While this is often just a start, the cycle begins to break as the alternative labor becomes more able to acquire money and socially signal market value. We knew the equal capacity from the outset, but through a charity and not the market is the capacity for improving society realized. There are many excellent water-oriented charities, but perhaps the most ironic for this conversation is the Fight for the Forgotten. Spearheaded by prize-fighting mixed martial artist Justin Wren, this charity uses funds to build wells in Uganda. Regardless of any one person's opinions on the occupation of prize fighting, we must acknowledge the absolutely ridiculous nature of market signaling contrasted here. The market will provide an outlet to accumulate social units for fighting another human in a cage under the industry of entertainment, which confers relatively little benefit to society, but diverting social units to beneficial floor-raising infrastructure requires the kindness of this man and his supporters. For both the beneficial nature of this work and the absurdity this dynamic highlights, I am happy to finally announce that we will be donating 50% of all profits over the pre-sale goal for the book to this charity. We know that the elimination of water bearing benefits society at large, as labor hours can be allocated to more productive and beneficial uses. But why this occurs in the first place brings us back to the namesake of the book, money-chasing behavior. Let's start by revisiting an example from the introduction. In this simplified example, we have two decision options of how to spend our labor. One, we can build wells to provide clean drinking water, and two, we can be telemarketers and sell people things that they don't really need. In the green cooperative quadrant, we have tangible production that provides substantial utility or benefit to well-being. In the red quadrant, we have little to no real production, with individuals convincing each other to purchase low-utility goods. So for this entire matrix, these payoff values represent real benefits. Things that we really create and their real payoffs to well-being. On top of our real decision options, we have an extra layer of social decisions that capture our attention and decision-making processes. Here we predominantly focus on monetary payoffs, or how much money we can acquire in exchange for labor. This is because money determines what we can purchase, and the things we purchase are the payoffs that affect our well-being. Digging wells in sub-Saharan Africa isn't going to pay as well as selling overpriced junk, so we gravitate towards the options that pay better. The problem, of course, is that good pay does not equate to a wise use of labor. When the real products of our labor are what provide us benefit, we inadvertently devolve to low-benefit labor because of monetary payoffs. Our system incentivizes free riding. We seek money for what money buys us, and when we can earn more money in jobs that contribute little to society, we become unconcerned with what our labor is used for. This creates a race to the bottom any time that monetary payoffs are disconnected from real benefits. Of course, when everyone does this unconsciously, we shoot ourselves in the foot, as the entire society is worse off than we could be with different labor decisions. When we are in a position to take jobs that pay better, we divert our attention to getting as much money out of those who have money, unless real wealth is produced. The labor-locked loop is the inverse consequence of money-chasing behavior, as labor capacity is disregarded because it cannot provide monetary payoffs in the market. This drives a wedge between populations regardless of geographic location. On the market side, money-chasing behavior moves the focus from productive labor to high monetary payoff yielding labor, and the labor on the right becomes locked in negative feedback cycles because its value is not recognized by the system. This makes those within a market grow the pie far less than is optimal, and the money supply contests over smaller slices. Those on the right cannot access or contribute to the main pie, so their labor is extra inefficient as they must make their own little pie using the most inefficient means. This is absurd given that our goal should be to use labor as efficiently as possible to grow the collective pie so that everyone is better off than our current systems make us. To wrap up by referring to the last lecture, this entire problem is due to the properties of our money or social units. And if you haven't seen the last lecture, this image is highlighting every problem with our money in relation to the pie. As we can see, this is way overcomplicated compared to how we should want our money to map onto reality. And if we were to simply tweak the properties of money, we could avoid all of this insanity. As we covered in the first two lectures, markets and supply and demand equilibriums are not entirely broken and counterproductive. They're just mainly broken and counterproductive. Markets become far more beneficial when we correct the currency and focus on taste goods, or goods that are not universally needed or desired by all. So things like clothing styles, movies and art selection, vehicles, and other preference-based goods can continue to use this equilibrium. In the next lecture, we will cover the road paver's dilemma, which uses the relationship between labor and taxes to show how most people cannot afford their own labor. If you learned something from this lecture, please share the video with others. If you'd like to support this work by pre-ordering the book to get us across the finish line to where 50% of the profits will go to the Fight for the Forgotten charity, the link is in the description. Like and subscribe for new lectures, and I will see you on the next one to discuss labor and taxes.